Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, we've got a myriad of just overwhelmingly talented Canadian artists, storytellers, artisans, and it's incumbent on guys like me to scream it from the mountaintops, as always. And guess what? If you're within the sound of my voice, we're going to be screaming from the mountaintops some more because you're in the seats with, again, once more, as usual, as per it were. But as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I sit down, I sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more. And as always, you can find us on, places like Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Google, because you're listening. And if you're not listening, keep listening. Hit that subscribe button. Give us your 5-star rating. And also, we archive every single one of our episodes over on our In the Seats YouTube channel, so give us a like and subscribe there as well. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, or X, as it were, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the TikTok, Threads, Tumblr, probably a few other places, and In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So do us that kindness, come on by, and please pay us a visit. On this episode, boy oh boy, we got some good stuff. It is opening, today, here in Toronto at the Scotiabank for a special screening. It is a fantastic drama from one of Canada's, more up-and-coming filmmakers. He's been around for a bit, but he's had a couple of this year, and that have really blown people out of the water. You may recognize his name from The King Tide, but it's writer-director Christian Sparks, and his new film is called Sweetland. It's the story of an endangered Newfoundland community and the struggles of one man determined to resist its extinction. It's really a story of relocation. It's a story of tradition. It's a story of wanting to hold on to one's life. And there's drama, there's a little bit of comedy, there's a bit of wryness, but I mean it's almost otherworldly in many ways too. Just being able to shoot on these remote coasts in Newfoundland, and just the universe that these gentlemen have created is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And if you want to go support Canadian cinema, head on out to the Scotia and go see Sweetland tonight, because darn it, it's a good film. But this morning we had the unique pleasure of speaking with the author of the book, Michael Crummey, and Christian Sparks himself, who worked on the script, about Sweetland and its story, how the guys met, and just getting it all together and making this wonderful, wonderful film in this really unique landscape of cinema that has been coming out of Newfoundland lately. There's really been some great stuff happening, but like I said, before I rattle on too much, go see Sweetland, go support Canadian cinema. But first, listen to our talk with author Michael Crummey and Christian Sparks, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. All right, well, I mean, obviously, both of you, just to kick this off officially, Christian, Michael, I mean, just thank you so much for the time today. I mean, congrats on the work on the movie.
Thank you so much.
No, I mean, Christian.
Yeah, thank you.
Obviously, we've talked before, but I mean, it feels like over the past 2 months, you've been the hardest working man in Canadian show business, just promoting stuff you've had going on. But I mean, walk me through, I guess, the origin of, meeting Michael and seeing his book and sort of having it all evolve from there.
Yes, I was going to say, someone's got to do it, Dave. Someone's got to do it. I had been aware, if you're a Newfoundlander, you know who Michael Crummey is. He's one of the preeminent kind of writers about Newfoundland and Newfoundland culture. I had somewhat recently, before Sweetland came out, read a book of his called Galore, which I was a big fan of, and a lot of people are a big fan of. And so I had heard about Sweetland, and I can't remember if I bought a copy or someone gave me a copy. But I remember getting it and reading it it only took me probably 2 or 3 sittings. And I remember still closing the cover of the book and thinking, for the first time of any book I've ever read, that I really want to turn this into a film. And I wonder if the rights are available. And I called my producing partner, Allison White. Then and there, we reached out to Michael's people, and the rights were available. And so I immediately began the task of thinking, now, how the hell am I going to do this thing? Suddenly it became very real. And I had known Michael in passing. We had met very briefly before on another shoot. But I decided it was important for me to dig in and start adapting it on my own and really understand the story for myself and how I wanted to do it before kind of weighing in and getting Michael's feeling on it. I hoped he would like it, but I just kind of worked in private first. And once I had a draft that I was really pleased with, I sent it over to him and kind of crossed my fingers.
Love it. Now, I mean, Michael, I guess maybe tell me that story in reverse, because obviously, especially with Sweetland, it definitely feels like this needed to be made by a filmmaker who understood the culture, understood sort of the island. It didn't necessarily, it couldn't have been sort of a job for hire kind of thing. It needed to be someone who really had a sense of what it meant to be a Newfoundlander.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I was thrilled when Christian approached me about it because I also feel like any transition from a book to a movie, it becomes a different creature, you know? So
Yeah,
I didn't have any illusions about it being the book on screen, but I was wanting what I felt was at the heart of the book to go with the movie, you know? And I felt like I from the first time Christian and I talked about it, I felt like he had a shot at doing that. And I think being from Newfoundland was an absolutely essential part of that.
for sure. For sure. Now, I mean, obviously this film begins and ends with Moses. I mean, talk to me a little bit about finding Mark and sort of the right person to command the screen really throughout this entire thing, because he does such a fantastic job in this.
He does. He does. He's in virtually every scene of the film. So you need someone who has that kind of real cinematic presence that can hold the camera. I originally thought maybe I was going to cast a Newfoundlander because it's such a quintessential Newfoundland story. And I knew I wanted a lot of specificity both to the world, but also the accents. And so the Newfoundland accent is notoriously hard to do. If anyone's seen the shipping news, it's just, it's not great. The accents anyway. Uh, and so it's that was important for me, but I couldn't find anyone who I thought had the presence and the gravitas to hold the screen the way he needed to. And so I'd been aware of Mark Lewis Jones, and we reached out to his people. And within days of sending it to him, he got back and was very excited about the project because for people who may or may not know him, he's an amazing character actor. He pops up in like Chernobyl, Game of Thrones, has an amazing role on The Crown. I've seen him in all kinds of things that I like, but rarely do these people get an opportunity to lead a film.
Right.
So I thought I knew he would bring it, and he did. I mean, he put a lot of energy into it. He worked with a dialect coach 3 months before we started rolling to really kind of perfect the accent. And once he landed, he's a hardy guy, so he knows how to cut wood and make it look authentic. He can like handle his way around a boat and a quad, all these things that outport living kind of require. He just kind of had that in spades. And I'd love to take credit for his performance, but really, I only had to remind him of where we were in the story. That's about as much direction as I gave him. Otherwise, I just stood back and let him cook, really.
Love it. Now, I mean,
I've
Michael,
been I've been telling, I've
go
been
ahead,
telling
please.
this story. I know I've been telling the story a lot, but I remember when Mark first landed, and Christian was kind of outfitting him in the different sort of iterations of what Sweetland might look like, and I immediately seeing him dressed up as Sweetland, I was like, this is the guy.
Love it. Now, I mean, I'm curious because obviously I don't know, without giving anything away, there's a rather significant part of the film that has no dialogue. And I mean, I'm kind of curious,
Mm.
Christian, for you, like, is having such a relationship with Michael sort of helpful in that area, or is it almost sort of is it extra pressure to sort of capture the essence of what he's obviously described in words without having to say any words? I can imagine there's a bit of a weird dichotomy there in terms of it's not just page to page, it's you're having to really sort of interpret things. on a visual landscape.
Absolutely. And I really kind of like that challenge. I mean, the book lays it all out so well. The book is the same kind of experience. Granted, in the book, in the second half, when there's very little dialogue because the characters are on their own, you see a lot of flashbacks to the past, which has dialogue. So that breaks up the second half.
Mm.
But I kind of had to, for budget reasons and otherwise, had to cut all of that out. And we're just kind of staying in the presence with this man, but it's who's basically alone on an island. Spoiler. But that's a great opportunity for me as a director to kind of flex my muscles and really lean into other auditory cues like sound design and music, all the great tools that you have as a director to keep the audience's attention. And so I joke with Michael, dialogue is only sometimes a chance for an audience to pick apart your movie or to tune out, right? Because they're like, everyone is very critical of performance and line readings and all this stuff. Where sometimes if it's a purely visual experience and you have a good command of tone, you can really kind of keep the audience in the palm of your hand a bit more.
No, I mean, I've got to ask because obviously nature and the environment that these characters are in plays such a huge part in the story. Like, did you manage to capture everything in camera? Like, did you have to sort of enhance any kind of the fog rolling in? Because I mean, there's some obviously beautiful shots that you got. But I mean, I'm kind of wondering, was it just waiting for the right moment, or did you have to sort of touch it up a little bit in post?
Well, shooting in Newfoundland, you for moody weather, it's always there. So
But you
a
can't
lot of it
control it
is a
though,
lot
you
of it's
know? It's not
sorry.
something you can control.
No, well, exactly. I mean, all you can do is the classic rule of thumb with filmmaking. If like the weather is bad, you shoot inside. If it's good, you shoot outside, right? It's like you can plan your schedule that way. But luckily, because of the nature of Newfoundland weather and a lot of like offshore work that happens on boats, there's a safety rescue training warehouse just outside of St. John's. So it's a warehouse where they have a wave tank and they can control. It's not overly big, but they control all the elements. You can add rain, wind, fog. You can get 2 meter waves. And all can be controlled with a guy with a walkie-talkie. Like more rain, more fog, and so all of those sequences in the boat, in the fog, and in stormy weather were done in a warehouse, which is great production value that you would never expect in a place like Newfoundland. But because of the safety rescue work, it was just sitting there.
Love it. Now, I mean,
Yeah.
especially in this story, there is almost this I don't want to say mythical because I mean that kind of overamps it, but I mean there is this real emotional sense of wanting to hang on to tradition and wanting to hang on to sort of a certain way of life. And I mean, I'm curious, I mean, particularly for you, Michael, but I mean both of you, like how important do you feel it is to sort of really get this across in sort of a broad form like a film like this? Because I mean, again, it's what Moses wants is a beautiful thing, but he's just going about it in a really kind of awkward and stubborn way.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started writing the book, it was a book about resettlement, and it was a
Yeah.
book about how people relate to one another when uh, they want very different things, and there doesn't seem to be any middle ground. Um, but I realized once I started writing the second half of that book that in some ways the whole issue of resettlement just became a metaphor for something larger.
Mm.
Um, and and what Sweetland goes through in the second half of the book and what he how he lives in the second half of the movie, I th I think it can be seen as uh, something beyond just the question of Newfoundland and Newfoundland traditions, all of which is in there, and all of which I think is really important to the book and to the film. But in some ways, I think it's about our experience of the world, and how at a certain point we realize we're going to lose everything we have.
Mm.
And how do we respond to that? Like how do we live in the world knowing that that's coming or going, as the case may be? But
Yeah.
I don't know, Christian, if you have anything more to say about that.
No, I mean, I think that's what makes the story so rich and powerful is that like it's hyper specific to Newfoundland while also being kind of universal. both like people are being forced out of their homes around the world continuously. That's something that a lot of people can relate to. But just in terms of the human condition, I think you mentioned it the other day, Michael, and I'm paraphrasing, but you know, everyone wants to kind of to stay on the island. No one really wants to leave the island, but no one gets to stay. That's not the way life works, and just our lives as human beings. So that's a really kind of like rich, big topic. But if you can do it with the specificity that Michael has brought to it and this culture and this one character, you get the best of both worlds, I think.
No, I mean, Michael, how much did you manage to sort of balance? I would imagine fiction with reality, because I mean, there's even sort of small bits like being on a small island community and sending each other notes, threatening notes cut out of a magazine. Feels like it's so ridiculous that it had to have been true from some story that you heard somewhere.
Actually, that one was completely made up.
Oh wow! Oh, there you go.
But the animosity behind it, or the willingness to use kind of mob tactics to deal with people who are unwilling to go along with the rest of the crowd, that's real. And I got to visit a little place called Little Bay Islands just before the novel came out. So it was finished. It was just ready to hit the stores. And they were dealing with this very issue at the time. There had been a couple of votes about people leaving, and most people wanted to go. And the people who were refusing to sign on to make it possible, it just soured everything on the island. And lifelong friendships were ruined, and families were at each other's throats. And so it was kind of amazing to see. I really had sat down and just imagined what that might be like. And it was pretty amazing then to be plunked into the middle of a community and to see I came pretty close actually to how it would play out.
Yeah, and just to add a small detail that I find, one of the small bits of levity in the film is the ransom says, "Get out or you'll be some sorry." So even the vernacular of the letters that are cut out is like a Newfoundland dialect, which is very funny to me. It's a small detail, but again, that kind of observation is what makes the story great.
Now, I mean, Christian, I'm curious because obviously with these two films that you've had out recently, it feels like it's running the spectrum of sort of the Newfoundland experience, if that makes any kind of sense. Because I mean, here in Sweetland, on one end, we're almost getting this very sort of almost dour but very real world sort of situation on the issues of relocation and what some of these island communities have had to go through, versus something like King Tide, which is still along that same theme, but also taking it in more of a mythical slash almost Stephen King kind of way and telling that story. Do you think with these two films you've managed to sort of give maybe the rest of the country a bit of a broader spectrum on what it means to sort of live in a community like Newfoundland?
I think so for sure. And I mean, I never would have thought that would even interest me when I was younger. I grew up in the suburbs in St. John's. I grew up watching American movies. I
For
couldn't
sure,
get
yeah.
away from Newfoundland quick enough in a way, but when I was 19 and went away to art school. But then a couple of years go by and you realize that where you're from gives you a unique perspective, especially when it's a place as unique as Newfoundland. And so I've only been kind of too happy to come back and share that story because a lot of Canada just really doesn't know about it. Some Newfoundlanders don't even know about their own history, to be honest. Younger Newfoundlanders, I think. And so it was only a pleasure for me to do that. But it's been interesting too. Michael is born in small town Newfoundland, whereas the writers of the King Tide, that was written by two people from Ontario. So it's only touched on in the King Tide in a very fanciful kind of way, whereas Sweetland is a much more rich kind of grounded interpretation. Both films have their place, but it was important for me to represent them somewhat differently stylistically, so they stood on their own. Two different points of view on a similar topic.
No, I mean, I'm curious because I mean, obviously, you can never control how these things get released and how things come out, but it definitely feels like these came out in the order that they needed to. Sort of King Tide being the sweetener, with Sweetland being sort of the really sort of richer deep dive. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think so, and I think Sweetland is definitely more. It's a meditative, Like, I was watching like Nuri Ceylan films like Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, Wild Pear Tree, and some McQueen like Hunger. Those kind of slower, artsier films that are more uncompromising, and they're not necessarily, not that they're not worried about the marketplace, but they're hopefully singular and they're very committed to their style, whether or not it's going to be for everyone or not. Whereas in the King Tide, I was definitely aware with a bigger budget and getting a return on investment, it had to be a bit more because of the story, broadly palatable.
Now I'm
It is
curious,
interesting to
Michael.
me that
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
just to say that uh, the responses that we've gotten to Sweetland, it does feel like most people feel like the second half of the movie is the stronger part of the film, which is, the artsier, more like that's committed to what it's doing. And it's been really interesting to see how people latch onto that and feel like that's when they really are taken into the film in a way that the first half is just a setup for.
Oh, but you know what? I mean, it's interesting that you say that because I almost think the reverse, because just the character work that we get in the first half sells the second half of it just so exceptionally well and gets us even that much more invested. It's one of those things where if you hadn't have found the right Moses or the right people to sort of really get this story across, it would have been uh it could have been a very different story. Now, I mean, just to put a bow on this, because I know we're running out of time, but I mean, Michael Christian, at the end of the day, I know this feels like a loaded question, but as more and more people get to see Sweetland, what do you hope sort of the ultimate pull away is?
Um, I mean, first and foremost, I hope people are just entertained and inspired. That's what I always hope. Well, like when I watch movies, this never gets old for me. I'm halfway through a good movie and I want to stop it and start making my own movie because I'm inspired to just get pen to paper and to just get up there and do it. And so I hope Sweetland and or King Tide or anything I make has the same effect for other artists who might be watching it, who think that they can do better or one up it. That's the feeling you always have, right? You're like, oh, I could do this too. Maybe I could go out and do this thing.
Yeah, that's not what I feel when I watch movies. But I mean, I think really, one thing I've noticed about people who have seen the film is they're still talking about it days later.
Yeah.
They're still asking questions about it, and they're still it's become a part of uh um it's a it it's a way of I guess like any good art. It's a way it changes the way you see the world and enables you to ask questions that you didn't even know you had in your head. And I think that that's what I would love to see the film do more of. And I think the more people that see it, the more that will be true.
Well, it feels corny to even say, but I mean, if we're getting a Newfoundland new wave of cinema out of this, then I'm all for it. But I mean, obviously, Michael Christian, again, just thank you both for the time today. And I mean, congratulations on the work, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for helping us get the word out there. It's a shameless plug. It's playing tonight at 7:05. It's Friday, May 17th at Scotiabank. Michael and I will be there doing a Q&A. So come in. I'm not sure when this airs, but if you hear it in
Oh, I'm
advance,
going to turn this around. I'm
say
going
hi
to
to
turn this around the second we cut, for sure.
him. There you go. Great.
But I
Thanks.
mean, again, guys, thanks for the time. And just on a side note, Christian, man, thanks again for doing that Instagram live the other day on Canada Film Day, man. I really appreciated your help on that.
Yeah, no, man. I think I love to see anyone who's supporting Canadian film, getting the word out. I know it's not always easy, but I really appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you again. And just again, have fun tonight. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.